Hi, this is Marijo Tinlin from the Teaching Your Toddler show. Today, we are welcoming back a very special guest, Florence Ann Romano, who is also known as the Windy City Nanny. She's an author, philanthropist, and a child care expert who started working as a nanny when she was only 11 years old. She worked in that field for 15 years, and now she helps parents. She has a very successful YouTube series called Windy City Nanny that helps shed light on all kinds of different childcare challenges. She also has a great website that is an amazing resource called windycitynanny.com. She's also written a book called Nanny and Me, which helps prepare children for the transition of being cared for outside the home. So let's welcome Florence Ann back to the show. This is Marijo Tinlin with the Teaching Your Toddler show, and today we have Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny, joining us again for the show, and I'm so excited to welcome her back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us again.
I'm so thrilled to be back here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a little while since we've chatted, and I know, just tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you've been up to lately.
Well, I was a former nanny for 15 years and wrote a children's book called Nanny and Me to help children learn about the transition of being cared for by their parents to being cared for by somebody else. And I really love to work with parents at this point now in my career, being a former nanny, about what's going on in the home, what are the values of the home, and really three very big ideas regarding what you should be looking for as you are raising these children. And my three platform kind of items are building your village, asking for help, and letting love in. So I've really been enjoying getting to know what parents are doing in their homes and how they are asking for help and letting love in. And it's amazing because there are so many common denominators with families, but then there are also some things that are unique and customized depending on where you live and the age of your children and the dynamics of your family.
Fantastic. Tell me a little bit more about your book.
So Nanny and Me, after being a nanny for 15 years, I kind of saw it all. And I realized that there was just a disservice being done in the children book world. And I wanted to talk directly to children about what happens when your parents go to work and who stays home with you. And I wanted it to be done from the child's perspective. So I wrote Nanny and Me to help children with that transition and also to help parents explain to their children about that transition and to make sure you are setting it up in a way that it's fun and exciting and that there will be memories made and that the children will be safe. And it just really a different way of approaching childcare when childcare in America today is so immense. And, the statistic is that over 64% of families in America today have a nanny or a caretaker. So I wanted to address that head on.
Oh, wow. So that may or may not be like a permanent kind of nanny in the home, but some sort of caretaker is what you're saying, 64%.
Exactly. Some sort of caretaker, and whether that's a few hours a day or it's a live-in, it all falls under the same umbrella of you are still needing help taking care of raising your children.
Fantastic. So I know, we've been going through COVID, or we've gone through COVID in 2020, and a lot of parents have reevaluated everything about what they're doing with their kids because by force they had to address education for their kids, right? Whether or not they had one kid in school or whatever, they had to decide, are we going to do this, homeschool permanently? How are we going to do this remote learning? All that kind of stuff. I know today, let's focus a little bit on your thoughts there, and tell me what your experience is. What are you seeing, and what are some of the things that parents should be thinking about as they are trying to address this whole new paradigm of education?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that parents, not that they weren't involved before, but I think you're looking at education in a different way because you've had to be so much more hands-on regarding your child's education, regarding the curriculum. And what I'm seeing after COVID and dealing with the ramifications and consequences of that, it's an interesting hybrid of, okay, what are they learning in school? What is the curriculum like? And then also, what are the things that we need to be teaching from home as well? What's the extension of what's going on in the classroom? And then how does that translate to the home? And then vice versa. What are we trying to teach in the home, and how does that translate to the classroom? So it's this hybrid idea, and maybe I'm a little over my skis with it, or maybe I'm a little ahead of the times, but I'm starting to see the writing on the wall about how these values of school and these values of a family, these really need to be married. It really needs to exist together. And as parents are figuring out what sort of environment they want for their children, that was challenged during COVID too. Do they like the one-on-one attention perhaps in the home? Maybe the child performed better being in that type of environment. Or when it was time for things to open up, parents were not happy with the idea that they weren't going to go back to school full-time 5 days a week, and they yanked the kids out of the public school system and put them into private school because they wanted them to be back in that environment, because they felt socially or developmentally they were not doing as well in the home environment that COVID made possible, and also you were kind of hostage to. So I'm seeing a lot of different experiences throughout the country regarding how people are approaching childcare, but the one common denominator is that it has challenged exactly what you parents want for your children going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea of what you said about marrying those values with, we've had these sort of parental values that we've been instilling on our kids by force, honestly, because we had to have them home for school, versus kind of letting the school dictate that, and especially in a public school where you probably don't have any control, whereas, in a private setting, in a private school setting, you are able to say, well, this school lines up to my values or whatever. So I think that that's a really interesting thing that parents are having to explore. And like, how are you seeing that sort of, how are parents reintegrating that, or how's that sort of playing out, that marrying of our home values versus schools?
Well, I keep telling parents that, something you learned from what COVID brought to us was that there wasn't enough time in the day to do every single thing you wanted. Parents were juggling having to work from home and still being diligent employees, and children were having to deal with online learning and the balance of all of that. And the biggest complaint I would get from parents all the time was, I feel like I'm failing my children. I feel like I'm failing them in the school system. They're so far behind. And I would say all the time, you know what? Every child across the globe, in our country, they're all on the same page. They're all in the same boat. They're all behind. Teachers will catch them up. It will be okay. Eventually it'll be okay. We can't deal with everything all at the same time when everything's crumbling down around you. So instead, what I said to parents was, maybe this is the time you need to be paying attention to the other things that they're maybe not practicing in school. Maybe this is a time to be focusing on manners or kindness or tolerance or compassion, these values that you want your children to grow up with. I much rather see my child come out of everything with COVID being a better child, being more compassionate and more tolerant and practicing kindness and all of these things, than them being able to do their multiplication tables perfectly. I rather see those things be worked on, and the family time, the bonding, being given the gift of time in a weird way, even though everything is so chaotic. You are still given an opportunity to put an emphasis in places that you weren't before. So that's what I'm seeing being the first steps toward integrating what happens at school and what happens at home and marrying those things.
Wow, that's a great way to look at it. And I mean, honestly, as a parent, I agree with you 100% that I would much rather have my child turn out as polite and sweet and, a good person. And like you said, the academics they'll work themselves out. I really like that. So tell me, have you seen, or how, maybe your advice for parents as they send their children back to wherever they've been, and maybe in this case, if the listeners have kids that might go to preschool part-time or something like that, are you seeing kids having any sort of anxiety or fear of going back to something where they they were told you're going to get sick, or something might be dangerous about going to school? How do you deal with that?
I think being honest with our children is always positive. I think being transparent is always important no matter the age of your child. But I do not agree with giving children more information or detail than they should be able to handle. You shouldn't be speaking to a 5-year-old about COVID the same way you're speaking to a 15-year-old. And I've seen that mistake happening in households. And I really do believe that the reason that conversation is happening in that kind of fearful way is because the parents themselves are scared, because the anxiety and stress of the parents, that's permeating out into the children. And so I know how difficult it is to try to temper your own reactions or your own feelings. And I'm not saying you shouldn't show your children how you feel, that they shouldn't see that you are afraid or that you have anxiety. These are all things that children need to see. These are real emotions that they want to be able to look to you, the parent, and be able to identify that in you so they can identify that in themselves. But again, a little sugar goes a long way. I don't believe children should be hearing the details the same way and adults should be. So making sure that children are learning the correct lessons of the moment are important. That, washing your hands and cleanliness and making sure, you've got that mask on and that you're not, spitting in kids' eyes or touching the kids when you're not supposed to be, and, working on all of that. But to instill this unbelievable fear in them, I don't think that you're doing the children any favors there. You have to set children up for success, to be able to deal with the adversities in life. And fear is never really a great tactic to do that. So give them the information in a way that is digestible for them and is also presented in a way that is motivating for them. Because children, their villages, they've been ripped away from their villages for months and months. Their friends, everything that they knew that was stable and exciting and comforting in their lives was gone when COVID happened. So when they're getting the opportunity to go back to some sort of support system, to go back to their village, I want them to be excited about that. And I know you do too as parents, but remember, you're digesting a lot of information because of the media, and the way you're digesting that and the way you're regurgitating that back to your friends and your family and your children, you have to be careful about that. So make sure you're censoring what you're doing. Make sure you're being thoughtful about the words that you're using and the strategy that you're using. And what is the end game? Remember asking yourself that question, what is the end game? And I think the end game is that we want our children to be able to feel secure and happy and excited about going back to their environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point about the fear that they reflect. They know. I mean, and just to go back a little bit to the beginning of the conversation, when we were sort of forced into this, we were trying to do too much as parents. We were trying to, be all things to all people, and that reflects on the kids. They get that. They see that. So, what are some good ways that you think, a parent who's overwhelmed, and this is not just because of COVID, but just in life in general, like how can we be better educators or better leaders to our children in general in terms of their education when we are super busy and we are overwhelmed? How do parents kind of keep it all together?
Keeping it all together is the key word there. How do you survive those moments? And I think the lesson that I would love parents to be able to step back and take in during this is that, teachers have a big job, and we all know and commend them for what they're doing. But parents also have to understand that letting that love in, asking for help, that exists in so many different ways in your life. I don't want parents to think they have to have all the answers. They're not supposed to. All you can do is take the information that you have at hand and make the best decision for your children. And that's why right now, as parents are making all sorts of decisions for their children, because of the consequences of COVID. But even beyond the consequences of COVID, I think we can't shame each other as parents, as caretakers, whomever it is, in whatever capacity that you work with children. We can't shame each other about the job that needs to be done. We need to lift each other up. Every parent is doing the best they can. So we need to sit there and support each other and say, I'm sure that was a difficult decision to make, but I am supporting you in the decision that's right for your family, for your children. So take this time as you are making decisions for your children and figure out what is best for your family. What are the values of your family? What are the end goals that you have for your children? And does the academic environment that you have your children in right now meet those goals? And you know what? Sometimes things change. Maybe COVID brought to light that you don't want your child in the school system that they're currently in. Maybe you want them to go somewhere else. Maybe they're going public to private or vice versa. Or maybe they're going to be homeschooled, whatever it might be. But maybe the experiences of COVID and the consequences of COVID have brought those things to light. And whatever decision you decide to make for your child, it's the right decision for you guys. And you should not feel pressure or intimidated from anyone else that you are not fitting in with what you see going on in your community or what other parents are doing. It has to be a customized situation for all children. And I think probably more than ever now, we are really realizing how customizable education really has to be, depending if your child has special needs or typical or whatever it might be. You need to make sure you're doing your research to find out what it is that you want for your child and what the end game is.
I realize that, and I've heard more and more about that with kids that, they weren't super happy in person and they went online and it was amazing. And then I've also heard of students that went online and tanked. And so I think it's really important what you said about that customizable, each kid is different, and within your family, they might be different too, right? One might thrive online and one might absolutely hate it. So I do think that it's been a great reminder for all of us to understand better what works for our families and what doesn't. Talk to me a little bit about, I know you said one of your core principles is the village. And so how can the village sort of help with families in educating from home or whatever the hybrid looks like, or even if they are at school, how does that all work as like a village?
The village is important just because it supports both the parents and the children. And I think the people that we let into our village, everyone always thinks, oh gosh, it's this quantity, and it's not. It's the quality of the people that you're allowing in. And that's academics even aside. It's in general, who are the role models in your children's lives? Who are the role models in your lives as parents? But as you look at who's helping, who the village is right now, the granny nanny is making a big comeback. The grandparents that are there to support their grandchildren or act oftentimes as nannies today. They're coming in and trying to help children. I think it's so funny because so many grandparents, they're sitting there in front of that computer and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. There's not a chance in heck I know how to do any of this work. But they're sitting there and they're trying. They're trying to support their grandkids. They're trying to support their grown children who are trying to put food on the table and work and balance it all. And so it's not about doing it perfectly. It's not about, fitting into this cookie cutter way regarding the village. It's friends, it's family. Sometimes it's hiring someone from Sitter City or care.com or these online places that, you would use to hire a babysitter or a nanny and have them come in and help, your kids with online learning or giving you a break during the day. Or maybe you're taking turns in the community and, moms are, saying, I'm going to take the morning shift with the kids and then, we're going to switch and I'm going to go to work and you can take the afternoon. It's being creative. It's supporting each other in whatever way you can right now to be able to survive this. And the truth is, we're in a far different place than we were at the beginning of the pandemic, where no one was allowed to be with anybody. And now it's a different situation where you are able to bring people into the home or in ways that still accommodate the CDC guidelines or whatever the accommodations need to be for your home or the rules of your home regarding hygiene or safety. But I think it's the idea that we need to open up to other people right now and say, hey, I don't want to do this alone and I don't have to do this alone, and getting creative about how we bring people into the fold and into the village.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah, I think you're right. Like just being open-minded, right? And just being open to whatever the the options are for you. Like you said, if your family's close by, or if you have trusted people that are around, or if you can do the vetting properly for those websites, the care.com or Sitter City, right? That you just need to be open to that. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for summarizing all of that. That was fantastic. I think those are some great ideas of ways that parents can kind of be open-minded about what this new paradigm in education looks like. So what else is going on with you that you'd like to sort of finish off with?
The one thing I would like to say, and the thing that I've heard from parents more often than not right now, is they just want to know that they're doing okay, that they're not causing irreparable damage in the worlds of their children. And I want to assure all the listeners that, life happens in this circular model, right? It's the survive and thrive. And right now, and for, in the past several months, it has seemed like it has just been survival. And you know what? A lot of times, even if there's not a pandemic, you feel like you're just surviving as a parent. And then, when do you get to that thrive part? And I really do believe that the thrive and the survive, you weave in and out of it, you navigate in and out of it, but it's not that it's just for these long stretches of time that you're just surviving. I think we have to find the thrive part of it through the survival, because not every moment is bad. There are the glimpses of hope and wonder and excitement and magic and all of those things that happen. So I want to challenge parents to find the thrive part of it, even if you feel like you're just surviving. And I think that's what gets you to the other side of those hard moments, is finding the happiness or the peace or the joy, even amidst all the chaos. And chaos happens no matter what. All we know, and that's one thing for sure, is that there will always be trials and tribulations ahead of us in the game of parenting and the game of raising children. But if you can start to compartmentalize it and realize that there has to be these moments of reflection and moments of peace and moments of awareness about the blessings that you do have or the fortunes that you do have. It gets you to the other side. And I think right now more than ever, seeing the light is really important, and finding what that light is in your life and what that means to you, that's the key to success.
Thank you. That's great advice, I think. And as parents, especially when our kids are really small and they're just, it's overwhelming, that those words are really, really reassuring, I think, for people. Tell us, before we close, how do people find you?
I'm all over social media. Please find me at Windy City Nanny on Instagram, on Facebook, and you can go to my website, windicitynanny.com. I've got blogs, a million there for you about all sorts of things to get you through, kind of every day of parenting and beyond, from new mommies to grandparents, dealing with being children's nannies. So please reach out to me. I always answer every DM.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, I will leave all those links in the show notes for people so they will be able to find you. And again, I appreciate you so much for coming back on the show. I can't wait to have you again as a guest. And thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This has been the Teaching Your Toddler podcast with Marijo Tinlin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll find us on our website at www.teachingyourtoddler.com, as well as on Facebook at Teaching Your Toddler, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Teaching Toddler. So join us again, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.